selling the oil to the West, and the West is arming the regime, and the regime uses the guns against its own population. The fundamentalist movement is strong and it's dangerous.
No doubt that some of these people who are making problems in Iraq and committing terrorist atrocities are actually Saudis.
This is a formula for real conflict. This is a formula for a country that is on the way to some very, very dangerous outcomes. The stability of Saudi Arabia over the long run is, in fact, questionable.
If the kingdom was to fall apart, it's very unlikely that the United States in particular would simply stand by and let it fall apart, given its significance as an oil exporting country. We would see certainly U.S. intervention, despite all the lessons and the problems that have been associated with Iraq.
One thing that many people, me included, fear is that when this happens, we will simply go and take by force of arms the oil that we need. And that will make us into a very different country and the world into a very different world.
We're looking at essentially a generation-long, multi-generational resource wars.
Ultimately, there really are only two options. One is to militarize the taking of oil, which means to get your population to understand that if they want to continue to drive SUVs and have the cars and consume energy in the way they are, that they will be in war after war. The other position is to begin to prepare for what we all see coming, which is an end to the era of cheap oil, and to invest in alternative technologies for energy that are cleaner, safer, and have less detrimental effects on the political and social makeup of oil exporting countries themselves.
For a century, we didn't spend a nanosecond actually really taxing ourselves as to could we ever actually come up with a replacement for oil and natural gas.
İnanırıq ki, bəşəriyyət insan zəkası o qədər böyükdür ki və tükənməzdir ki, o insan zəkası o qədər inkişaf edəcək ki, o neftin mütləq nəsə bir alternativ bir şey tapılacaq da, ne diyeyim sizə, yanacaq mənbəyi deyimi, ya qida mənbəyi kimi tapılacaq. Və mən buna arxayınam.
The Stone Age ended not because we ran out of stones. We moved from the horse to the automobile, not because we ran out of hay. I don't dismiss the ingenuity of man. The step that we're embarking on today is the hybrid electric automobile, which has both an internal combustion engine and an electric motor.
I drive a Prius car. It gets 45 miles per gallon. If gas were $10 a gallon, I can still fill the tank and go 500 miles on it, and that's not too bad.
Well, even if you wave the magic wand and hybridize every car on the road right now, we'd still be consuming the same amount of gasoline that we are now in about 5 or 7 years. Because again, with each passing year, the economy grows and we have to consume more and more oil.
We have very big challenges to face in this century. This is a planet that has 6 billion people on it now, perhaps 9 billion people by the end of the century.
The problem is enormous. 14 terawatts of energy we need by 2050. We need a new source of that much energy. That's equivalent to 220 million barrels of oil per day.
We've got 700 million internal combustion engines running around the roads of the world.
Again, we're talking about the scale, and we're thinking about what does it take to really replace fossil fuels for transportation.
The big one, of course, which is hydrogen, that's the one that's going to do the trick and replace oil eventually.
Well, the hydrogen economy is conceptually a good idea. If you look in reality, it has major challenges. The problem also for industry is sort of a chicken and egg thing. Industry is reluctant to really invest heavily into fuel cell technology because there's no hydrogen infrastructure to deliver and produce cheaply hydrogen. On the other hand, this infrastructure is not in place because there is no demand for hydrogen. So how do you get this started? And both, again, need substantial breakthroughs in technology. Fuel cell technology, hydrogen production technology, transportation of hydrogen and storage of hydrogen are fundamentally unresolved issues.
The economics right now are that we use the equivalent of 3 to 6 gallons of gasoline to make enough hydrogen to drive a car the same distance that 1 gallon of gasoline would drive it. So the hydrogen economy at this point makes no sense.
If you talk about hydrogen, it may take at least 40 years.
Easily 30 to 50 years. Easily.
The principal drawback to biomass is that it's generally pretty inefficient.
A couple of pretty respected scientists in our country believe that if you look at all of the energy inputs into producing ethanol, you put more fossil fuel into producing the ethanol than the energy you get out.
The quantities that could be made available from ethanol and biodiesel are very, very small, and would replace only a small percentage of the fuels that we consume today.
Even if you took the biodiesel production, scaled it up to the maximum, and then scaled that up another 10 times, you're still talking about a drop in the bucket compared to what we get from oil.
How much of our food acreage are we going to convert to growing fuel? How much world hunger can we stand if that's the fuel of choice?
Nuclear energy will be expensive, and the experience that we have gathered over the last 20, 30, 40 years in terms of safe storage of materials, especially in Europe, where there's much more discussion about how to treat the waste and what to do with that. This needs to be rethought.
People are nervous about the risk of an explosion or a nuclear event of some sort, and then there's a danger of terrorist activity.
If you wanted to build enough to replace all the fossil fuel that we burn worldwide today, which is 10 terawatts, you would have to build 10,000 of the biggest possible nuclear plants. And if you did that, and burn U-235 in them, the worldwide reserves of uranium would be exhausted in somewhere between 1 and 2 decades. So it would be a bridge at best. Wind energy is becoming more popular and economically viable, but because of its intermittency and low power density, it will never contribute more than a small fraction of our energy supply.
when you talk about wind or solar energy, whatever, these are very small.
Can we?
Oh yeah, I see it starting.
Can we turn that on a little bit more? Oh yeah.
There it goes.
Okay. So here, this is actually an artificial light. In sunshine, this does the same thing. And so this little machine is converting light directly into electric power. It'll convert 10 or 12% of sunlight directly into electric power.
And we do have the technology to know how to do
We have the technology right now. We know how to do it. Yes, we don't build these big power plants tomorrow morning, but we know how. It takes a lot of development of equipment and so on. But we know how to do it now.
The total amount of sunlight that falls on the planet is 20,000 times the amount of fossil fuel power we're using now. So we are awash in sunlight. There's plenty of energy from sunlight. We just haven't begun to learn how to use it properly.
The real barrier to implementing solar electricity now is its cost.
To generate the same amount of power we now use in fossil fuel, you'd have to cover a land area roughly half the size of the state of California. All of the solar cells made in the world up to now probably would only cover about 10 square kilometers. It's a tiny fraction of it, so not impossible, not unthinkable, but really a huge technological challenge.
We've got to look at all of these sources of energy, and if you add them all together, you must be very optimistic.